there is a truth that many people often overlook. Narcissists, or people with narcissistic traits, live in a constant state of anger. Yet strangely, they are not angry because someone treated them unfairly or because life has been especially cruel to them. In reality, they are angry for a completely different reason. They exist in a world where everything must revolve around them. A simple indifferent glance, a gentle piece of feedback, or even your silence is enough to make them feel threatened. What seems trivial to us feels like a direct blow to their most fragile point, their brittle sense of self. You might see them as proud, composed, and seemingly untouched by negative emotions, but don't be fooled by that facade. Beneath that mask lies a very real fear, the fear that if they are no longer admired or noticed, they will simply cease to matter. Their ego is like a shiny mirror, dazzling on the surface, but one small scratch is all it takes to make it crack. That's why even the slightest comment that doesn't meet their expectations can trigger a sudden outburst of rage, not to attack you, but to protect themselves from internal collapse. So, remember, their anger is not a sign of strength, it is just thin armor covering a deep sense of smallness that they desperately hide. They need that rage because it shields them from confronting an unbearable truth. They are not perfect, and that is what terrifies them most. To truly understand narcissists, we must start here. They do not rage because they are strong, they rage because they are afraid. And that anger is the clearest signal that deep down, they are a trembling, fragile self, desperately seeking validation. So, in this video, we will explore 5 reasons why narcissists are always angry, so that we no longer feel harmed by them, but instead understand them and face their storm with calm and clarity. Let's begin. And to truly understand why they are always angry, we must start at the very beginning. Reason number 1, the fragile ego. Every word feels like a wound. To a narcissist, their sense of self isn't built on solid ground. It's a grand structure made of glass. It looks impressive, polished, and commanding from a distance, but one light touch, and it cracks. They wear a mask of confidence, coldness, even superiority. You see strength on the surface, but step a little closer, and you'll realize what they call self-esteem is really just a glass palace built on sand. Because it's so fragile, every word becomes a potential blow, a gentle reminder, a soft, "I think you could improve here." Even a moment of silence from you, simply because you were tired, suddenly becomes an attack in their eyes. You had no ill intention, but to them, you just stabbed their deepest insecurity. A normal person hears feedback and adjusts. But to a narcissist, any form of correction equals humiliation. They cannot tell the difference between feedback and insult, between silence and disdain. Because to them, no one is allowed to make them feel small. Every word must make them feel superior, admired, impressive. The moment you fail to deliver that, you've hit their greatest fear, the fear that they're not special at all. So instead of listening, they strike back. They don't wait for clarification. They instantly counterattack. You're the one with the problem. You're jealous. You misunderstood. Rage becomes a shield, not to win, but to avoid having to face themselves. For narcissists, anger is survival instinct, like a cornered animal lashing out when a beam of light hits the darkness it hides. They're not angry because you're wrong. They're angry because you reminded them they're not perfect. They're not angry because your words were cruel. They're angry because the truth you reflected was too painful. You were just being honest, but to them, it was a wound. Moreover, to truly understand their endless anger, we must look at a deeper core need. Reason number 2, constant need for emotional supply. Ignored once, and they'll explode. A narcissist cannot generate genuine self-worth from within. They don't know how to feel valuable without external validation. They live like an empty vessel, only filled when someone else pours into them. And the water they survive on is attention, admiration, and emotional affirmation from others. You are not seen as a person with feelings or boundaries. To them, You are an emotional supply source, fuel they need to keep their ego alive. You may have seen how sweet they are at the start, caring, attentive, hanging on your every word. That's not love, that's an investment. They're building a supply bank for later use, and once you've fallen for the charm, they'll begin to slowly draw from you the praise, the reassurance, the gaze that tells them they matter. Yet eventually, you will grow tired, you'll shift your focus back to your own life, you stop complimenting them, you look away too long, and just like that, their whole world collapses. To a narcissist, being ignored is not just a lack of attention, it is the death of their ego. They cannot stand the feeling of not being seen, not being needed, not being the main character in someone else's story. And so, their anger erupts like a survival instinct. They must force your gaze back to them, no matter the cost. They blame you for changing. They accuse you of being cold, distant, unloving. But the truth is this, you are simply living your life. They just can't tolerate it. Tragically, their anger often works. You fear the explosion, the guilt-tripping, the withdrawal. So you soothe them, you explain, you prove you still care, you return to being their supply. Their anger subsides, not because they understand you, but because they've been refueled enough to keep existing. For narcissists, silence is the ultimate punishment. Try not reacting, not indulging their tantrums, not playing their emotional game, and you'll watch them panic, unravel, as if you're erasing them from existence. Because in their world, if no one sees them, they cease to exist. In addition, if we dig deeper into their psychology, we'll find ourselves face to face with a shadow they themselves can't bear to look at. Reason number 3, fear of exposure, anger to hide shame. This, perhaps, is the deepest root of the narcissist's persistent rage. Behind the facade of confidence, or even arrogance, lies a profound wound, shame. But not the fleeting embarrassment we all feel from time to time. This is primal shame, buried deep in the subconscious, formed during early years. Perhaps they were compared, mocked, belittled as children. Or, conversely, they were excessively praised and pedestalized, yet never truly loved. They learned early on, to be loved, I must be perfect. And to survive, they had to rise above at all costs. Thus, the mask was born. But that mask is fragile. It's like a glossy coat of paint over cracked wood. The moment it's even slightly threatened, the illusion trembles. A gentle disagreement, a lack of admiration, or simply the moment you no longer view them the way you once did, suddenly they feel stripped bare in a crowded room. The shame floods in, sharp, burning, and because they don't know how to sit with that emotion, they externalize it through anger. They cannot say, I was wrong, because to them, being wrong isn't just an action, it's an identity. I am wrong. They don't understand that humans can still have worth despite making mistakes. In their world, one crack means the entire structure is collapsing. So they react intensely. They distort facts. They attack you as if you've betrayed them, simply because you didn't agree without question. The strange part is this. They are not aware of their overreaction in the moment. In their minds, they are genuinely under attack, being disrespected, humiliated. You say, I disagree. What they hear is, you are nothing. They fight back not only to punish you for daring to challenge them, but also to silence the imagined laughter they hear in their head, a laughter directed at their unmasked vulnerability. They rage to hide their shame. They lash out to avoid confronting the truth. They are terrified of not being enough. And that is why narcissists react so extremely, not because they can't accept truth, but because truth makes them feel exposed and small. Not only that, to fully grasp the narcissist's constant anger, we need to look at another core psychological mechanism. Reason number 4, inability to take responsibility, needing anger to flip the script. For most people, admitting a mistake, though uncomfortable, is doable. But for a narcissist, admitting fault is like watching the entire fortress they've built collapse. Because if they say, I was wrong, they must confront a painful truth. They're not perfect. They're not superior. They are not above others. And to them, that is worse than personal destruction. It is the end of the ego illusion they depend on to survive. So they fight responsibility at any cost. You might gently ask, do you think you are being a bit harsh? In that moment, they don't hear a question. They hear an alarm. And instantly, their most familiar weapon springs up, rage. Not rage at you, but rage at the truth that's beginning to seep in. They'll deny, deflect, you're remembering it wrong. You made me act this way. Other people said that, not me. They flip the narrative so effortlessly that if you're not grounded, you'll soon find yourself thinking, did I really misinterpret? And here's the key. Their anger is not some mindless outburst. It's a tool, a strategy. They get angry to silence you, to throw you off balance, to make you doubt yourself and eventually abandon the simple, reasonable request you made. Take responsibility. With them, anger becomes the most effective way to blur the line between right and wrong. They'll spend hours explaining why it's your fault, the situation's fault, everyone else's fault, everyone but them. When cornered, they escalate, sarcasm, personal attacks, victim playing, or disappearing in punishing silence. Anything to make you feel guilty, to make you apologize, to make you retreat. Because to them, preserving the image of "I am always right" outweighs any relationship. In their mind, if they do not win, they die. Not physically, but the fragile ego inside them shatters. And that, to them, is worse than death. For the narcissist, anger is not just a reaction, it's a weapon of self-preservation. And once you understand this, their irrational rage becomes clear. It's not about you. It's about defending the fragile narrative they live inside. Finally, if we look deeper into how narcissists use anger, we'll face a hard truth. Reason number 5, anger as a weapon of control, fearful of losing power without it. Here, anger isn't a sudden emotional reaction, nor is it a sign of true strength. It is a tool, a calculated strategy, a form of emotional power that the narcissist uses to control, manipulate, and silence any attempt to challenge them. They know one thing for sure: you don't want conflict. You are a normal human being. You want peace, kindness, and the feeling of safety and love. And because you treasure these things, they weaponize them. Every time they rage, whether by shouting, slamming doors, or offering silent hostility, you are shaken. You wonder, what did I do wrong? Should I apologize? Should I just let this go? And the moment you cave in, they win. Because when you fear their anger, you stop telling the truth. You stop asking for respect. You stop being yourself. You tiptoe around your own home. It's not only the obvious anger, the yelling, the insults that they use. Narcissists also employ more subtle, insidious forms of anger: cold eyes, icy silence, dismissive tones. These hurt you deeply, yet they're impossible to confront. They act as punishment, making you feel confused, guilty, and desperate to win back their approval, just to feel safe again. In their world, their emotions are the center, and you must orbit around them like a captive star. When they're happy, you breathe. When they're angry, the whole room becomes suffocating. And that is the entire point, because once you fear their anger, you will never dare to speak the truth again. Everything becomes because you upset them, because you disappointed them, because you made them feel bad. The painful truth is this: they don't use anger because they are powerful. They use it because they are terrified. Terrified that without this weapon, they will lose control. Terrified you'll see the emptiness they're hiding. Terrified you'll leave. So they choose to dominate your emotional world to make sure they remain in control. A narcissist does not know how to love without control. They do not know how to exist without dominance, and anger is the weapon that ensures they always stay the main character, no matter who gets hurt. And from there, if you look back at this journey, from the fragile ego to the fear of being ignored, the unspoken shame, the refusal to take responsibility, all the way to wielding anger as a weapon of control, you'll see something unmistakable. You cannot win against a narcissist if you play by their rules. because they are not seeking truth, love, or genuine connection. They're seeking victory. And that victory is often built on your peace, your energy, and your sense of self. The more you try to explain, the more they use anger to deflect. The more you love with patience, the deeper you sink into the emotional chaos they create. Anger, apology, hope, disappointment. That is the cycle they need you to stay in, because only when you keep reacting, trying, and justifying do they get to keep their starring role. You think you're loving them, but in truth, you're addicted to an illusion they carefully constructed. You believe you can heal them, but slowly, you're the one being drained. Every reason for their anger, the fragility, the insecurity, the fear, the denial of responsibility, the manipulation of power, all points to one reality. They're fighting a battle against their own shadow, and you're just caught in the crossfire. And then one day, you wake up to this truth. Winning against them doesn't mean getting through to them. Winning means stepping out of the game. Winning is when you stop reacting to their rage, when you stop trying to be understood, when you choose what they never could, to face the truth, starting with yourself. The truth that they may never change. But you can. You can walk away. You can stop answering every emotional trap. You can choose peace, not them. And the moment you do that, you are the one who truly wins. Because strength isn't in who shouts the loudest, it's in who no longer needs to. Don't try to win by arguing harder or enduring more. Win by stepping away, without resentment, without dramatic confrontation, simply because you choose yourself, you choose peace. You choose a life where your nervous system isn't held hostage by someone else's emotions. And then, in the end, it won't be them, but you who stands whole, grounded, and truly free.